Chapter 8:12. Yu Qianqiu laughed and walked over to pat him on the shoulder. He seemed to have found the feeling when a mortal crocodile patted him. Then he said, "Don't worry, it won't be long before a large number of experts will come to command you. I guarantee that you'll have a good time in the divine ruin realm." Shui Mingqing was shocked by his pat and nodded with an awkward smile. "I'll follow Senior's arrangements, Senior's arrangements." Yu Qianqiu looked around and pointed to the valley. "Find a place to hide in this valley first. Wait for me for a day or two. I'll come find you then." "A day or two?" Shui Mingqing immediately said with a bitter face, "Senior, there are no good places to hide in this valley. I'm afraid I won't be able to hold on for a day or two before I'm discovered." "I see." Yu Qianqiu was startled. He waved his hand and said, "It's okay, I'll give you a safe place to hide." Just as he waved his hand, the ground surged and the two of them went straight underground. Shui Mingqing looked around in surprise and said blankly, "Earth manipulation technique." The layer of soil above their heads healed and the light disappeared instantly. The two of them were still sinking until they reached a depth of about 100 meters underground. Yu Qianqiu learned from Huang Tian that day and scattered a large pile of fluorite. The surrounding layer of soil was inlaid with fluorite and retreated. In a short while, a spacious underground room was formed with tables and chairs. Although Shui Mingqing knew of the earth manipulation technique, it was still the first time he witnessed such a magical scene. His eyes couldn't help but shine as he cupped his hands and praised, "Senior's methods are indeed extraordinary. Junior is impressed. Stop flattering me and don't run around. Wait for me to come back." Yu Qianqiu dove into the soil and disappeared. The cornucopia of the world commerce had lost its former prosperity. Although the ruins had been cleaned up, it would still take time for the cornucopia to recover its former vitality. The half-collapsed god of wealth peak became steeper and steeper. The protective formation that had been broken back then could no longer be set up because of Yin Baikong's death. Even if it could be set up, it would certainly not be as powerful as the one Yin Baikong had set up. World Chamber of Commerce no longer had such a capable person. Yu Qianqiu stood quietly at the edge of the cliff outside the cornucopia. The suspension bridge leading to the cornucopia was right in front of him. It had lost its usual sense of mystery. The cornucopia was no longer shrouded by clouds and mist, and the situation inside was clear at a glance. Even the Hall of Wealth on the God of Wealth Peak could be seen clearly. Yu Qianqiu sighed softly. Without Yin Baikong, the World Commerce Association lacked a little flavor. Yin Baikong's courage that day when he was on the brink of death and didn't even care about the afterlife was indeed admirable. Even after thousands of years, if the World Chamber of Commerce still existed, then no one would be able to avoid Yin Baikong, the founder of the World Chamber of Commerce. He could be considered to have died a worthy death, preserving his prestige for a lifetime. Two cultivators came together. It was unknown which sect they were from, but they were about to cross the bridge and enter the treasure basin. Suddenly, they noticed a person standing at the bridgehead, blocking their way. One of them immediately shouted, "Friend, please stand to the side. Don't block the way." Yu Qianqiu slowly turned his head and looked at the two indifferently. With a flash, he turned into an afterimage and directly shot towards the God of Wealth Peak. The person who shouted immediately clicked his tongue and said, "Look at this speed, his cultivation is really extraordinary. I wonder where he came from. Ah! Let's go. Why are you in a daze?" He pulled the other person. The latter slowly looked at him and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Do you know who you shouted at just now? He's already gone. Who cares who he is? Don't tell me it's the world's #1 expert, Yu Qianqiu. Let's go." That person laughed. The other person immediately gave him a thumbs up and said, "You guessed it right. He's Yu Qianqiu." The former's face froze. He was stunned on the spot and couldn't laugh anymore. The butcher of the cultivation world in the past, the current punishment master of the demon region, and the world's #1 expert, Yu Qianqiu. This person is not a kind person. He's famous for being cruel and merciless. God knows how many people have died in his hands. 4 of the world's top 10 experts have already died in his hands, and I actually asked him to make way. In the Hall of Wealth Reverence, Xikong Ju and Jing Yuankong were gathered together, working together to discuss the plan to revive the World Commerce Chamber. Suddenly, they saw a figure land outside. With his back facing the 2 of them, he slowly stood under the pine tree with his hands behind his back. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, the 2 of them wouldn't have realized that someone had arrived. They were instantly shocked. This person's cultivation is so high. The 2 of them came out in a flash. Xikong Ju stared at the person's back and said in a deep voice, "May I know which expert has graced my cornucopia with his presence?" Back then, your master often stood here to watch the clouds gather and disperse, and the world change. Back then, I didn't understand what was so interesting about it, but now I understand. This kind of behavior will slowly cultivate one's character and make one's heart as broad as the heavens and earth. That's why your master self-destructed. If it was fatty pay, even if there was the slightest hope, he would still compromise and live on. This is the difference between people. Some people's arrogance is not on the surface, but in their bones. Your master is this kind of person, which is why he can prop up such a huge world commerce chamber. This is courage, something you 2 brothers should learn from. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around and looked at the 2 of them with a smile. Yu Qianqiu. The 2 of them cried out in unison. Then, as if remembering something, the 2 of them looked at each other and immediately cupped their hands. Greetings, torture envoy. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to be so polite. He asked with a smile, "How is it? Is the World Commerce Chamber all right? No one has any designs on the World Commerce Chamber, right?" Xikong Ju immediately took a step forward and answered, "Senior Bai has spoken, and the torture envoy has shaken the world, so no one dares to have any designs on the World Commerce Chamber." These words had already expressed their attitude, set their position, and made it clear that the World Commerce Chamber was a part of the demon domain. Although they said this, their hearts were pounding. They didn't know why Yu Qianqiu would suddenly come to God of Wealth Peak. Was he really going to reach out to the World Commerce Chamber? Hee. Don't be so courteous. I'm here to ask for your help. Yu Qianqiu said bluntly, the World Commerce Chamber's contact network is spread across all the countries. I want you to help me spread a message. Tell all the soul formation experts in the world that the great formation sealing the holy East lands has been broken, and the trapped experts from the immortal and netherworld have already returned. Within 2 days, I want all the soul formation experts in the world to gather in the holy East lands. At that time, I have an important announcement. Those who can't get there within 2 days will bear the consequences. Holy East lands. Xikong Ju and Jing Yuankong were stunned by this news. As Nongzhu knew that this matter was of great importance, she didn't let Nanming Patriarch divulge the news, so everyone didn't know about this news in a short period of time. From Yu Qianqiu's words, the 2 of them couldn't help but think of the rumors from a while ago. It was said that a large number of mysterious experts had suddenly passed through the skies of China's cultivation world. Seeing that the 2 of them were still in a daze, Yu Qianqiu frowned and asked indifferently, "Can you help me spread the news as quickly as possible?" The 2 of them suddenly came back to their senses and expressed that there was no problem. After a slight pause, Xikong Ju asked softly, "All the soul formation cultivators are going. Then, are we going to go as well?" Yu Qianqiu stared at the 2 of them and said in a low voice, "You 2 can discuss it among yourselves. Just one of you will go. After all, the World Chamber of Commerce is such a big business and it needs someone to take charge. If one of you comes, go and experience it. It will be beneficial to the development of the World Chamber of Commerce. Also, Xian Island has been destroyed, so there's no need to inform Nanming Patriarch and Nongzhu. The other soul formation experts must be informed. It's up to them whether they want to come or not. Let them decide for themselves. The reason why he didn't want to inform Nongzhu and Nanming Patriarch was mainly because he was worried that those women wouldn't have anyone to protect them. After all, Yan Zhuixing's matter hadn't been completely settled and he didn't know what would happen in the future. After receiving the news, Bing Qingzi's disciples had also disappeared. He ordered Gu Qingyun and Hong Qi to send people to secretly search for them, but there was still no news until now. He didn't know where they were hiding. Because of this, he didn't dare to relax his protection of those women. Although Yan Zhuixing's matter hadn't been completely settled and it made him feel uncomfortable, he didn't have the time to play hide and seek with Yan Zhuixing. He wouldn't give up eating for fear of choking because of Yan Zhuixing. He still had to do what he needed to do. The two of them looked at each other and Sikongju nodded. "We'll go and arrange it now." Yu Qianqiu didn't say much and disappeared on the spot. The two of them looked at each other and Sikongju nodded. "We'll go and arrange it now." Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything else and disappeared on the spot. The two of them were stunned once again. Yu Qianqiu, who had returned to Utopia, immediately found a remote place. He cast the earth mantra and sank several hundred meters underground. Another pile of fluorite was scattered out, and the surrounding soil, which was embedded with fluorite, retreated. In the blink of an eye, a grand underground palace was formed. However, this underground palace wasn't like before. The decorations in the surroundings were arranged in picturesque disorder. Standing in it would give people a feeling of being in a mysterious formation. After spending half a day and putting in a lot of effort to carve the underground palace to make it more mysterious, he nodded in satisfaction and silently memorized the layout before disappearing on the spot. When he appeared again, he appeared in the underground palace where he had met the underworld saintess. He released his divine sense and scanned the surroundings. After confirming that there was no one around, he waved his hand and pointed at the ground. The dark stone floor melted, and the soil underground also melted. He slowly walked down, and a slanted underground tunnel formed. When he was nearly 100 meters down, he scattered another pile of fluorite and executed the earth art. Chapter 8:13. In the sky above the vast East Sea, more than 300 soul formation experts gathered in a group and quickly flew toward the East Holy Land. The lineup was huge and spectacular, rarely seen in the cultivation world. They were led by Nongzhu, Wen Lanfeng, Li Duxing, and Hu Changshou, the three experts at the last stage of transforming spirit realm. They were also the only few experts at the last stage of transforming spirit realm in the cultivation world except for Yu Qianqiu. Most of the other soul formation experts had died in the hands of the previous torturers of the demon ghost region. The hundreds of people behind them were mostly lords in the middle stage of the soul formation realm. There were also some in the early stage like Sikongju. Lu Yanqing was also in this group. There was no other way, she was also a soul formation expert. Who would dare to disobey the order of the demon ghost region's torturer? The death of Pei Fang and the others was a warning. At this time, Lu Yanqing was no longer wearing the gauze hat she wore when she went out. Her short hair was wrapped in a piece of gauze, and her expression was neither happy nor sad. The appearance of her stunning appearance should have attracted everyone's attention, but everyone's expressions were grave. No one could be satisfied with her at this time. Looking down at the surging waves of the ocean below, everyone's emotions were fluctuating like the ocean. Right now, the opening of the East Holy Land wasn't the thing they were most concerned about. What they were most worried about was something else, the appointment at the East Sea again. The soul formation experts' hearts trembled at the thought of this word. The previous torturer of the demon ghost region, Bai Changchun, had invited everyone to the East Sea to show off his power. He had ruthlessly slaughtered several people and intimidated the entire cultivation world. Now, the new torturer of the demon ghost region had come to the East Sea again. Oh my god. What did Yu Qianqiu want to do? Did he want to ruthlessly show off his power like his master? Was the death of Pei Fong, Ouyangde, Qi Zhujuan, and Bing Qingzi not enough? When the group received the order from the World Chamber of Commerce, they were all dumbfounded. They hurriedly used the communication array to contact each other, only to find that everyone had received a terrible invitation. Actually, no one wanted to go, but no one dared to say no. Yu Qianqiu's vicious and merciless methods were well known. In the end, a group of people came up with a good idea. All of them gathered in the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea and begged Nongzhu to speak for them at the critical moment, because Nongzhu had a good relationship with the two torture envoys of the demon ghost region. Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had summoned all the deification realm experts in the world to gather in the East Holy Land. Seeing this group of people coming together, Nongzhu almost jumped in fright, thinking that this group of people wanted to join hands to deal with her. When he figured out what was going on, he also thought that Yu Qianqiu was trying to copy old Bai Li Wei. Even the place he picked was so similar. Since Yu Qianqiu wanted to make a move, it wasn't appropriate for him to interfere. He didn't want to come. However, he could not resist everyone's pleading. Moreover, seeing that Wen Lanfeng, Lu Yanqing, and the others had also received an invitation, he could no longer ignore it. So he left ancestor Nanming to look after the house and rushed over with a group of people. Above the undulating blue sea, the group of people all stopped at the place where there was supposed to be called Xian Island. They looked around, but there was no trace of Xian Island. Looking ahead again, the East Holy Land, which had been covered by the white fog for many years, finally unveiled its mysterious veil. Everyone looked ahead in a daze. No matter whether they believed it or not, that mysterious land was in front of them. Nongzhu looked back at the crowd and said with a wry smile, "Since everyone is here, let's go and have a look together." Then she took the lead and flew over, followed by a group of people. As soon as they arrived in the sky above the East Holy Land, they couldn't help looking around, but they didn't find how dangerous this legendary place was. It seemed to be no different from the land on the other side of the sea. They looked around but didn't find Yu Qianqiu's figure there. Li Duxing's eyes flashed, and his only arm pointed to a towering stele not far away. It stood in front of them like a tower and was very conspicuous. Nongzhu led a group of people to fly over again. There was a big arrow on the stele, and there were words beside it, "Go straight in the direction of the arrow. I'll wait for you in front. Come as soon as possible and destroy the stele after you've seen it. Yu Qianqiu." The group of people looked at each other and then at each other. They didn't know what Yu Qianqiu was doing. It didn't look like he was going to use them to show his power. The arrowhead pointed to the east. Nongzhu struck out a fierce gang wind with one palm. With a loud bang, the earth stele disintegrated instantly. Then she waved her hand and said, "Let's go. Let's go and see what that guy is doing." The group of people quickly flew toward the east. The mountains and rivers below passed quickly under their eyes, and they were amazed by the occasional glimpse of the indigenous tribes. On the way, they occasionally saw cities and secular people bustling on the streets of the cities. They couldn't believe that this was the legendary dangerous Holy Land of East. They flew for a whole day, but still didn't see Yu Qianqiu's figure. They all suspected that they had bumped into Yu Qianqiu. But they had been flying east according to the direction of Yu Qianqiu's arrow. They didn't change their direction. Just as everyone was flying above a vast primeval forest, in the midst of a mountain range, a shout suddenly came from below, "Stop flying, here, it's right here." Hearing that, they stopped and looked down. They vaguely saw Yu Qianqiu waving to them on the top of a towering hill. He shouted, come down, don't dawdle. Come down, it's here. Let's go." Nongzhu seemed to have become the leader. With a shout, she led everyone to fly down together. When everyone floated in front of Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but be stunned when he saw Nongzhu. He said, "I didn't ask you to come, why are you here?" Nongzhu said unhappily, "You made such a big commotion, I had to come even if I didn't want to." As he said that, he turned to look at the people behind him. Many people turned their heads guiltily. They were the people who urged him to come. When Lanfeng subconsciously turned to look at Lu Yanqing and found that she was biting her lips and staring at Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou first counted everyone. Seeing that except for Nanming Ancestor and Jing Yuankong, everyone who should be here was here, he immediately waved his hand and said, "All right. Everyone, follow me." He flew towards a gloomy valley in the middle of the towering mountains. Nongzhu followed behind and shouted, "What on earth do you want to do by bringing us here?" When everyone landed in the gloomy call, they immediately found that there was a mountain gate on the side of the concave mountain wall. It was a dark mountain gate that led to an underground cave residence. They really couldn't see it from the top, so they had to stand in front of it. The stone-carved mountain gate was grand, simple, and elegant. There were strange patterns carved on it, and it was obvious that it was a very old thing. The underground cave residence behind the mountain gate was dark, and a gust of cold air was coming out from inside. Nongzhu looked at Yu Qianzhou who was walking toward the mountain gate and asked suspiciously, "What did you bring us here for? What is this place?" Standing on the steps of the mountain gate, Yu Qianzhou turned to look at everyone and explained with a smile, "This is a good place." Back then, there were immortals from the immortal world who were trapped in the East Holy Land. They ruled this continent and built an immortal city on the ground, but it was empty now. The other group of people who were trapped were the meditation cultivators from the underworld. They dug out an underground world under this mountain, and this is the entrance to the underground world. When the East Holy Land was broken, all the immortals and meditation cultivators went home, leaving behind this empty underworld. Everyone was shocked. Although Yu Qianzhou said that the people from the underworld had all left, they still couldn't help but feel a chill on their backs. They all looked at the entrance behind Yu Qianzhou in horror. The corner of Nongzhu's mouth twitched. "You called us here just to let us see this. Why? You don't like it?" Yu Qianzhou stood in the middle of the mountain gate and sneered, "Don't be fooled by the creepy atmosphere in here. Let me tell you, there is an amazing treasure hidden in here. Once you see it, I'm afraid I won't be able to chase you away." Although his words were pleasant to hear, everyone's face was filled with doubt. If there was really such a good treasure, why did you call us here? Nongzhu frowned and said in a low voice, "Yu Qianzhou, don't make fun of us. It's such a secret place, hidden in such a vast mountain range. How did you find this place? Damn it. Why did you come here and pretend to be a good person? You made it inconvenient for me to use violence." Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes and said, "Did you forget that after the East Holy Land formation was broken, my master went back to Shantian Island?" Nongzhu was stunned. "Did Old Bai tell you the location before he went to the underworld?" Everyone was shocked again. Bai Changchun actually came out of the East Holy Land and went to the underworld. Nonsense. If my master didn't tell me, how could I find this place? Yu Qianzhou suddenly chuckled and said, "I won't hide it from you all. I found a shocking secret here. There's a teleportation formation here that leads to an abandoned immortal grass garden from the immortal world. I have already gone there once through the teleportation array, but it is too big and the immortal herbs are scattered in the mountains. I don't have enough manpower to search for them by myself. Plus, there are some ferocious beasts in there. Those who are not at the demigod realm can't handle them. So I thought of asking for your help. But don't worry, I won't let you work for nothing. Everyone will get a share of the immortal herbs." Everyone looked at each other. They were all skeptical of this statement. Nongzhu sneered and said, "Since there is a teleportation array here, why would those people from the immortal world and the underworld be trapped for so long? Who's afraid of a glib tongue? Yu Qianzhou's expression turned serious and said, "The heaven and earth formation that seals the East Holy Land is no small matter. It was set up by the Thousand Swords demon monarch himself. As the name suggests, it can seal the heaven and earth." In the beginning, they didn't realize that the heaven and earth formation could isolate the teleportation function of the teleportation array. After it was built, they found out that it was useless. In the end, they left it and let us take advantage of it. Chapter 8:14. In the gloomy valley, over 300 soul-forming stage experts were silent. Contrasted with the surrounding environment, the atmosphere was a little strange. Ren Yu Qianzhou's words were earth-shattering, but everyone still maintained a skeptical attitude. What kind of people were there? They were people who had experienced the cruel survival of the fittest in the cultivation world. How could they be convinced by a few words when faced with such a mysterious matter? Everyone's eyes were fixed on the pitch-black entrance to the underworld. No one knew what was inside, but no matter how they looked at it, it was dangerous. Yu Qianzhou's gaze swept around. Seeing that everyone was suspicious and silent, he was instantly enraged. He snorted coldly, "Let me make this clear today. Those who are willing to come in and help me, we will be friends in the future. Those who are unwilling, we will be enemies in the future. You guys decide for yourselves." If Nongzhu had not come to join in the fun, he would not have been so polite. Now that he was too lazy to be long-winded, he directly made his threat. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately turned around and walked inside. Yu Qianzhou's words were very obvious. Whether they lived or died, it was up to them. Everyone was dumbfounded. The corner of Nongzhu's mouth twitched. She cursed in her heart. Sure enough, a dog can't change its spots. He revealed his true nature in less than 3 sentences. "Yu Qianzhou!" Nongzhu shouted and stopped Yu Qianzhou in a flash. She frowned and said, "They didn't say that they wouldn't help you. But even I think it's too mysterious, let alone them. You have to let them think about it." Yu Qianzhou raised his eyebrows and sneered, "Do you think I will harm you?" "Ah." Nongzhu was stunned. After thinking about it, she realized that this brat would not harm her. After a pause, she said, "To be able to survive in the cultivation world to this day, who hasn't been careful, one step at a time." Before she could finish, Yu Qianzhou waved a jade archive in his hand and interrupted her, "I found this in the immortal herb garden. There are illustrations of various kinds of immortal herbs in it. Take a look. If you still don't believe me, then there's nothing I can do. You guys decide for yourselves." Nongzhu took it suspiciously and injected her divine sense into it to have a look. She was immediately attracted by all kinds of vivid and lifelike immortal herbs, which seemed to be swaying in front of her eyes. The rarest part was that there were various kinds of immortal herbs prices listed inside, easily going up to several 100 million divine-grade spirit stones. The detailed notes also indicated that this immortal herb was the main ingredient of a certain immortal pill. The things inside were just too shocking. The names of some elixirs seemed to have been heard of in legends. Nongzhu felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She withdrew her divine sense and stared at Yu Qianzhou in astonishment. Everyone looked at each other, wondering what Nongzhu had seen that made her look so lost. For a moment, everyone was curious and wanted to see what was inside. Suddenly, Nongzhu cried out involuntarily, "Are there really these things in there? Believe it or not, it's up to you." Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly. Lu Yanqing's lips quivered slightly. She had established herself in the cultivation world with her medical skills and was sensitive to all kinds of rare spiritual herbs. Now that she heard about immortal herbs and Nongzhu's loss of composure, it was hard for her not to be tempted. When Lanfeng glanced at her and moved to Nongzhu's side in a flash. She took out the jade archive from Nongzhu's hand and injected her divine sense into it to have a look. She was immediately captivated by what she saw. After a long time, she came to her senses and moved to Liu Yanqing's side, passing the jade archive to her in silence. Liu Yanqing could not wait to receive it. After a brief examination, her delicate body trembled and she eagerly immersed herself in the fantasy world of the immortal herbs inside the jade archive. Yu Qianqiu waited for a while and grew impatient. At this rate, there was nothing they could do. He immediately shouted, "Great miracle healer Liu, we don't have time to wait for you. Everyone, quickly turn it around. One look is enough. Once we enter the immortal herb garden, we can look at the real thing." When Liu Yanqing regained her senses, she looked a little embarrassed. However, she still reluctantly passed the jade archive to the others. Thus, the jade archive was turned around in everyone's hands and finally returned to Yu Qianqiu's hands. Those who had seen the jade archive had their eyes lit up. Not to mention the miraculous effects of the immortal herbs, just the value of each stalk in divine grade spirit stones was enough to make one's heart palpitate. After looking at the contents of the jade archive, they compared it to the items in the cultivation world. The items in the jade archive were simply rubbish. Everyone was considered to have seen a lot in the cultivation world. The details of the jade archive were intricately engraved, definitely not the work of an ordinary person. In the cultivation world, they had never seen something so lifelike engraved on a jade archive. Everyone knew that with their cultivation, they would not be able to achieve such a feat. However, there was one thing they could be sure of: this jade archive was not a fake. Yu Qianqiu put away the jade archive. Disregarding everyone's agreement, he said indifferently, "The underground palace is very complicated and dangerous. Everyone, follow closely. I won't be responsible if anything happens." He turned around and entered. Unexpectedly, while everyone was still hesitating, Hu Changshou took the lead and followed behind Yu Qianqiu. Nongzhu was next, then Liu Yanqing, followed by Wen Lanfeng, Li Duxing, Xikong Ju. At this point, there was nothing more to think about. Everyone entered the underground palace one after another. Those who were overly cautious and did not want to enter could not bear the consequences of offending Yu Qianqiu. Thus, they could only follow the crowd and enter. In the blink of an eye, the secluded valley outside became empty. The world inside the underworld was indeed vast. The passages were as dense as a woven web. If one was not careful, it was possible to take a wrong turn. It was obvious that the underworld had gone through many twists and turns. Many places had collapsed ruins. In addition, Yu Qianqiu had said that this place was dangerous. Everyone followed closely behind the people in front, afraid that they would lose track of them. Under Yu Qianqiu's guidance, everyone soon arrived at the holy temple. Here, Yu Qianqiu stood in front of the tunnel that the holy temple had created and waited for a while. When everyone had arrived, he secretly counted the number of people. When he found that everyone was present, he immediately waved his hand and pointed to the surrounding walls. He smiled and said, "Since everyone has come here, we can't let you come empty-handed. It's good to broaden your horizons. Everyone can take a look at the carvings on the surrounding walls. Can anyone guess who these carvings are?" Hearing this, everyone looked around curiously. From the carvings on the walls, they could tell that they were from a very long time ago. On the left and right sides, there were carvings of 6 generals in battle armor. All of them looked mighty and extraordinary. Everyone couldn't help but look at the high platform in the middle where the 12 generals were staring. The carving there was of a scholar with only his back visible. It looked like he was splashing ink by the side of a table. Hu Changshou, who was standing next to Yu Qianqiu, stared at the carvings with suspicion. He muttered, "Could it be that the one in the middle is the legendary emperor of the underworld?" Clap, clap. Yu Qianqiu suddenly clapped his hands. The crisp sound echoed in the holy temple. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "Palace Lord who has a good eye. When I first saw him, I couldn't believe that this scholar was the legendary emperor of the underworld. However, the truth is the truth. This person is indeed the emperor of the underworld. Gasps could be heard in the holy temple. That was the legendary emperor of the underworld. Everyone's eyes widened as they carefully looked at the scholar. The more they looked, the more they felt that the back of the scholar was very mysterious. It would have been better if he had only shown his back, but it gave everyone a mysterious feeling. Everyone's hearts involuntarily filled with awe and veneration. No one could have imagined that they would see the legendary emperor of the underworld. Although it was just a mural with a back, the back of that illusory figure was finally revealed. Yu Qianqiu smiled as he stood to the side and looked at everyone's reaction. The reason why he introduced all this was to let everyone get used to it. With the back of the emperor of the underworld as a cushion, they wouldn't feel weak when they went out and met the shrimp soldiers and crab generals of the immortal world. Do you know who the figures on the two sides of the wall are? Yu Qianqiu asked as he pointed to the two sides of the wall. After looking at it for a while, everyone shook their heads slightly. That era was too far away from them. In the legends that were still being passed down, everyone only knew about the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld. They knew that these two were the rulers of the immortal world and the underworld. Everything else was vague. Yu Qianqiu was indeed ready to start enlightening them. He was ready to open up a wider world for them to accompany him on his journey. He stood there and said with assurance, under the immortal emperor of the immortal world, there are 12 immortal monarchs. Under the emperor of the underworld, there are 12 underworld generals. The figures on the two sides of the wall are the 12 underworld generals of the underworld. 12 underworld generals. Everyone was in an uproar. Their minds were in a mess as they kept looking at the carvings on the two sides of the wall. Everyone, don't be too concerned. The experts of the immortal world and the underworld are not as scary as you think. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, let me tell you the truth. After I used the teleportation array to go there, I have killed dozens of cultivators from the immortal world. His words caused an uproar in the underground palace. Nongzhu snorted coldly and said, are you kidding me? Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, I'm not kidding. In fact, there are many people in the immortal world whose cultivation base is lower than ours. You will understand when you see them. Of course, there are many who have a higher cultivation base than us. As he said that, he suddenly untied the storage pouch hanging on his waist and took out the things inside. With a thwah sound, a pile of shiny black spirit stones piled up to his shoulder. Yu Qianqiu casually picked up a spirit stone from the pile and said with a smile, everyone, do you know what this is? I snatched these from the immortal world. Everyone, take a piece and have a look. Everyone stared at the pile of spirit stones with their mouths agape. They could vaguely guess what it was, but none of them dared to confirm it. Standing to the side, Hu Changshu reached out to grab a piece and held it in his palm. He immediately exclaimed, divine-grade spirit stones, they are really divine-grade spirit stones. His exclamation was shocking. Adding on to the fact that Yu Qianqiu had asked everyone to take a piece to have a look, everyone immediately reached out and grabbed a piece from the air. A moment later, cries of divine-grade spirit stones filled the entire holy palace. Everyone stared at the pile of divine-grade spirit stones in disbelief. If a divine-grade spirit stone was equivalent to 100 million high-grade spirit stones, then wouldn't the total value of the divine-grade spirit stones here be more than 1 trillion high-grade spirit stones? In an instant, everyone's eyes were burning with passion. Chapter 8:15. Nongzhu stared at Yu Qianqiu with an exaggerated expression. Back then, Yin Baikong was considered rich, right? He was indeed rich. But compared to this guy, he was nothing. This guy was too rich, with a net worth of trillions of upper-grade spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu smiled at everyone's fanatical expressions. This was the effect he wanted. He wanted to stimulate everyone's enthusiasm. Suddenly, he heard a clattering sound. He turned his head and looked. In the blink of an eye, Nongzhu had already stuffed a few handfuls of spirit stones into his storage bag. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry, and quickly snatched the large pile of spirit stones on the ground and put them into his storage bag. Nongzhu held a handful of spirit stones in each hand and laughed wildly. In a short while, he had collected hundreds of spirit stones worth billions of upper-grade spirit stones. Nongzhu had never been so rich. This money came so easily. Take it back. Yu Qianqiu shouted. Ha! Nongzhu looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. She put the spirit stones in her hands into the storage bag and walked to the side. She looked like she was ready to be bitten. This rascal could not be beaten, but he was not afraid of being scolded. Yu Qianqiu did not know what to do with him at the moment. He could only comfort himself by saying that it was the accommodation fee for Furong and the others in the purple bamboo forest. But the accommodation fee that was worth 10 billion high-grade spirit stones was too damn expensive. Yu Qianqiu felt like crying. He said to the crowd angrily, "Take the spirit stones in your hands as a gift. All of you, follow me to the celestial realm to make a fortune." The last sentence was almost shouted out. He turned around and walked into the tunnel. Hu Changtian was unusually enthusiastic this time. He was the first to follow. The crowd looked at each other and someone shouted, "Let's go to the celestial realm to make a fortune." This sentence seemed to be more effective than 10 sentences from Yu Qianqiu. It immediately caused everyone's emotions to explode. Everyone was so excited that they scrambled to be the first to enter the tunnel. Once they reached the underground palace, they quickly looked around and found that it was indeed a large array. Yu Qianqiu did a head count and said in a low voice, "Everyone, don't move. I'm going to activate the teleportation portal." Everyone's eyes quickly focused on him. They saw that there was a pentagonal platform in front of him. When he pressed his palm against the center of the platform, a wave of divine sense quickly enveloped everyone. Everyone immediately tensed up. They felt as though the entire underground palace had moved a little. Suddenly, their eyes lit up, and their surroundings had changed. Everyone looked around and discovered that they were in a misty valley. The sky was white and misty, and they couldn't see the sun. Amidst his shock, he suddenly discovered that the misty white fog was actually formed by the condensation of dense spiritual energy. It was indeed not a place that the human world could compare with. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Everyone be careful, there has been a fight here." None of these people were to be trifled with. They were all ambitious and ruthless characters. Their reactions were top-notch. As soon as they heard someone shout out those words, they immediately spread out in all directions. Their magic tools were already in their hands, and their gazes were like owls as they looked around vigilantly. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "Don't be nervous, everyone. These people were already dead when I left." Everyone heaved a sigh of relief, but they didn't need to say anything. They almost subconsciously formed groups of 2 or 3, leaning against each other with their backs against each other, and silently looked around every corner of the valley. When they were in the human world, they might have been enemies, but in this foreign land, they suddenly became incomparably trusting and unprecedentedly united. Nongzhu looked around and immediately asked curiously, "Is this the immortal herb garden?" Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and said, "This immortal herb garden is called the Realm of Divine Ruins. Legend has it that it was a place for cultivation opened by the ancient gods, but it was later abandoned for some reason. It opens to the immortal realm once every 100 years for a month. During this period, all the sects in the immortal realm will send people to search for rare treasures." After his embellishment and evasive description, he exaggerated this place into a treasure bowl with little risk and great opportunities. Everyone's eyes shone brightly, looking around from time to time. When they saw a weed that they didn't recognize, they immediately thought it was an immortal herb. They couldn't bear to move their eyes away. What if it was a herb that was worth 100 million divine-grade spirit stones? Excited. As for the matter of the immortal palace sending hundreds of immortal realm masters into the realm of divine ruins, everyone had directly forgotten about it. In Yu Qianzhou's words, we don't provoke immortal realm masters, we specialize in dealing with those spirit-severing stage masters, we specialize in robbing those spirit-severing stage masters. More than 300 spirit-severing stage masters should be enough to deal with one person, right? Everyone, don't be too excited. After all, this is the immortal world's territory. Although getting rich is a big deal, safety is still the first priority. Although I, Yu Qianzhou, have quarreled with everyone in the past, at this moment. As the saying goes, people are especially cheap when they are away from home. Being in the immortal world, the first thing we must do is to stick together. Only by protecting ourselves and our strength can we have a chance to get rich. Sooner or later, there will be a place for us in the immortal world. In short, I, Yu Qianzhou, as the Demon Ghost Region's punishment envoy, since I brought everyone here safely, I have the responsibility and obligation to bring everyone back safely. I hope that everyone won't be blinded by money and become hot-headed. In the days to come, I, Yu Qianzhou, will still need everyone's help in the immortal world. Please take care of yourselves all. Yu Qianzhou looked at everyone with an affectionate look, giving a passionate speech. At first, this guy fooled everyone and made them think that the immortal world was just a so-so. Then, he began to pour cold water on them. Both good and bad people were involved. However, the tempting bait had been thrown out. In addition, it was human nature that it was easy to be prejudiced by first impressions. The most irresistible temptation was the chance to become an immortal and forge an immortal body. This was a legend that had not been heard in the cultivation world for many years. Since there was such an easy chance, everyone would give it a try even if they had to risk their lives. Torture envoy. A shout came from the crowd. Yunantian, who was dressed in a fluffy white fur coat and had an extremely elegant temperament, walked over slowly. He cupped his hands and asked unhurriedly, "Torture envoy, you said that as long as we collect enough immortal herbs, we can all forge an immortal body. How can we believe that your guarantee is true?" Yu Qianzhou's expression turned solemn. He raised one hand and solemnly said, "As long as everyone works together with me, I swear that I will do my best to help everyone realize this wish in the shortest time possible. If I break this oath, let me die a horrible death." As soon as this oath was made, everyone became even more spirited. To them, oaths were not fun. Previously, Bing Qingzi had made a heaven-defying oath, and in the end, he really did fulfill his oath and ended up dying a horrible death. Everyone believed it without a doubt. Little did they know that after hearing Immortal Crocodile's words, Yu Qianzhou treated oaths as if they were farts. However, it was true that he wanted to help everyone improve their cultivation. Nongzhu looked at Yu Qianzhou in surprise. At first, she thought that this guy was up to something again. She did not expect that he would really do it this time. Good. Yunantian clapped his hands and shouted. He also raised his hand and said, "Since Torture Enforcer Yu has made an oath, I, Yunantian, will also make an oath. As long as Torture Enforcer Yu sincerely helps us realize our long-cherished wish of immortality, I, Yunantian, am willing to serve you faithfully. If I break this oath, may the heavens and the earth destroy me." As soon as he finished speaking, Hu Changshou could not wait to make a solemn oath as well. To be honest, everyone noticed Hu Changshou's unusual behavior. It seemed that ever since he received Yu Qianzhou's invitation, he had been using his actions to express his desire to chase after Yu Qianzhou, which puzzled everyone. This was called knowing one's own business. How could others know the pain and fear in Hu Changshou's heart? Except for Yin Baikong, the other 4 from the 2 alliances of the top 10 masters had all died in the hands of Yu Qianzhou. Now he was the only one left. When he received Yu Qianzhou's invitation, he was scared out of his wits. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that if Yu Qianqiu wanted to establish his might, the first person Yu Qianqiu would deal with would surely be him. If he didn't behave, then this fellow Yu Qianqiu wasn't a good person. With two people taking the lead, the others also made an oath to follow. In the blink of an eye, many people could not help but laugh out loud. No one had expected that they would work together like this. Nongzhu knew Yu Qianqiu all too well. She stood silently at the side, watching the fanatical expressions on everyone's faces. She felt that something was wrong. In fact, she was not the only one. There were many others who were not as hot-headed as Yu Qianqiu, but they had been tricked into this place by Yu Qianqiu. Not only would they not be able to return, they might not even be able to keep their lives. Thus, they could only go with the flow. Since everyone thinks so highly of me, Yu Qianqiu, then I will no longer hold back. Otherwise, I would be too petty. Yu Qianqiu took out the 100 sets of illustrated jade archives from his storage pouch and put one away in front of everyone. Then, he said in all seriousness, here are 99 sets of illustrated jade archives that contain almost all the rare treasures in the immortal realm. We have more than 300 people. Everyone, look for each other and form groups of 3 or 4. We will be divided into 99 groups. Each of us will take a set of the illustrated jade archives. Our grand plan begins now. Ha! Roars of laughter rang out in the valley. Everyone immediately looked for people they were on good terms with in the past to form a group. In an instant, the valley descended into chaos. Damn it! Don't they know how to restrain themselves? Do they really think this is a vegetable garden? Yu Qianqiu looked outside the valley warily. He suddenly burrowed into the ground and pulled Shui Mingqing out under everyone's watchful eyes. The valley immediately quietened down. Everyone's eyes were focused on Shui Mingqing, and Shui Mingqing was completely dumbfounded. The people before him were all dressed differently, and each of them had an extraordinary aura. Although they were all cultivators in the soul-forming stage, they faintly exuded an air of superiority that he could not compare to. He was very sure that these people were definitely not the dull disciples from the various sects who had been restrained for a long time. Their gazes were like owls, sending chills down one's spine. Chapter 8:16. Shui Mingqing's late-stage soul formation cultivation naturally attracted everyone's attention. The cultivation world had never seen this person before, so everyone vaguely guessed that he was someone from the celestial world. Everyone, let me introduce a friend to everyone. Yu Qianqiu pointed at Shui Mingqing and introduced Shui Mingqing, a disciple of the celestial world's #1 alchemy sect, Heaven Palace. In the future, we will definitely have frequent dealings with Heaven Palace. The last sentence had a profound meaning, and everyone's eyes lit up. Dealing with the celestial world's #1 alchemy sect was naturally for immortal pills. More than 300 people cupped their hands towards Shui Mingqing with friendly expressions, which made Shui Mingqing feel a little flattered. He had never been treated so respectfully by so many soul formation cultivators, so he cupped his hands in return. His flattered appearance immediately made everyone feel disdainful, and they believed Yu Qianqiu's words even more. The soul formation cultivators in the celestial world were only so-so. After the greetings, the 99 groups of soul formation cultivators each received a set of jade archives, and then they gathered together to discuss how to search for treasures. In the end, under Yu Qianqiu's decision, it was decided that the 99 groups would form a large triangular formation to sweep through the ruins of God. The few late-stage soul formation cultivators would be in the center of the triangular formation, coordinating with each other. The biggest advantage of such a formation was safety. No matter which point of the triangular formation was in danger, the people on both sides could quickly gather to support, and the late-stage soul formation cultivators in the center could also arrive as quickly as possible. This way, everyone's safety was greatly guaranteed. No matter who it was, as long as they dared to invade them, they would have to bear the combined attack of 200 or so soul formation cultivators from both sides. The power of this combined attack was terrifying and huge. Of course, this kind of power was only relative to the soul formation cultivators in the celestial world, and it might not be enough to deal with celestial experts. However, Yu Qianqiu had a strict requirement, and that was, no matter what spirit stones or rare treasures they obtained, they had to be immediately sent by one of the groups to the late-stage soul formation cultivator in the center of the triangular formation. The late-stage soul formation cultivator would take care of them, and everyone would supervise each other. No one was allowed to hide anything, and they would discuss the distribution afterwards. Shui Mingqing, who was watching silently from the side, was completely speechless when he saw the smug look on their faces. What kind of people are they? Yu Qianqiu kept glancing at Shui Mingqing. If he wanted to cooperate with Chao Tian Palace after this, if he didn't show some strength, he was afraid that they wouldn't pay attention to him. He wanted to let Skyward Palace know through Shui Mingqing's mouth that he was not an ordinary person. Only when there was a factor that made the other party pay attention to him would it be possible for them to sit down and talk. After the two levels of rescue signals were unified, the group finally arrived outside the valley and set up a formation, ready to set off. The so-called two levels of rescue signals were the distress signals that were used when one was in trouble. When a level 2 signal was sent out, the people on both sides would quickly rush over to help. When a level 1 signal was sent out, everyone would rush over to help. If it was a small problem that could be solved by themselves, they naturally wouldn't send out a distress signal. At the request of Wen Lanfeng and Li Duxing, Lu Yanqing was also left in the center of the triangular formation. No one had any opinion on this. First of all, many people owed Lu Yanqing a favor. Second, if anyone was injured, Lu Yanqing would be in the middle to provide support and treatment, so everyone could feel at ease. Moreover, everyone knew Lu Yanqing's character more or less. Fighting and killing was really not suitable for her. Whoever teamed up with her would probably be a burden. Shui Mingqing was also left in the center of the triangular formation. Nongzhu and several other experts at the late stage of Huashan realm, as well as the lords of other countries, had received a hint from Yu Qianqiu. They knew that this person was a starting point of contact with Chao Tian Palace. He was of value to everyone at present, so they wouldn't let him leave the team easily. 99 groups of people formed a triangular formation, covering an area of nearly a kilometer, and began to slowly advance to the depths of the divine ruin realm on foot. Although they were in a dangerous place, it was easy for everyone to remain vigilant. To be able to become a lord, everyone was more or less a person with some foresight. Everyone understood that this was not the cultivation world, where all the scheming would only bring disaster to themselves. Here, everyone could only maximize their own interests by working together. After the mutual taboos of the past were replaced by mutual trust, everyone was immediately filled with confidence. With all the elite experts of the world gathered, even the heavens would have to poke a hole in it. What else was there to be afraid of? At this time, everyone realized that it was such a pleasant thing to trust each other. Even if they were in danger, it would be like walking on flat ground. At least they didn't have to worry about someone stabbing them in the back. Instead, there was someone protecting them from behind. This unprecedented feeling was too wonderful for everyone. As they sighed, they faintly felt a sense of cherishing. The triangular formation was advancing in a triangular vanguard, led by Yunantian and the two lords. The three of them each held a jade archive and compared it as they walked. Yunantian was dressed in a white velvet coat. Coupled with his graceful and luxurious temperament, he felt as if he was strolling leisurely in the divine ruin realm. Quick, look at this. This stalk of grass looks rather special. It's very likely to be an immortal herb, one of them said excitedly as he pointed at a stalk of small purple leaf grass. Yunantian's eyes brightened. He took a serious look at the appearance of the small leaf grass, then quickly injected his divine sense into the jade archive and quickly browsed through it. The other two also quickly searched through the jade archive with mid to low-grade immortal herb illustrations. After they were done examining it, they looked at each other, shook their heads, and continued forward. At first, their speed was rather slow. After everyone repeatedly compared the jade archive, they gradually formed an impression of the contents. Most of the weeds in the divine ruin realm could be eliminated with a glance. With the powerful memory of these elites of the world, it didn't take them half a day to memorize most of the contents of a jade archive after repeatedly browsing through it. Thus, everyone exchanged jade archives of high, low, and middle grades, and the speed at which they advanced gradually increased. As for Yu Qianqiu, he was a person who couldn't stay idle. With so many people searching for spiritual herbs, he wouldn't make much of a difference. He had already separated himself from the crowd and headed towards the depths of the divine ruin realm. As for how big the divine ruin realm was, Yu Qianqiu had no idea. Thus, he didn't know where the deepest part of the divine ruin realm was. According to common logic, the entrance to the divine ruin realm extended in all directions. The deeper one went, the deeper one went. After leaving the triangular formation and flying for a while, he could gradually sense that there were people coming and going in his desolate surroundings. From time to time, someone would use their divine sense to spy on him. The people hiding in the dark were very careful. When they saw him flying so casually in the divine ruin realm alone, coupled with the fact that they couldn't see through his cultivation, they immediately guessed that he wasn't a good person and took the initiative to hide far away. From time to time, Yu Qianqiu would sweep his cold gaze around, but he couldn't be bothered to argue with them. When the people in the triangular formation behind him pressed forward, with the fanaticism of those 300 people, these people would definitely suffer. Even if they didn't provoke the experts of the various countries, the latter wouldn't let them off so easily. As they flew forward, more and more people appeared. In the end, they could already see groups of people wandering around the mountains looking for treasures. Traces of fighting could be seen everywhere in the mountains. The corpses with broken limbs told of the cruel battles that had taken place before. The battles below would always happen inadvertently, and Yu Qianqiu would always stop and watch with the mentality of watching a good show. Often, when one side suddenly discovered some rare treasure that had yet to be collected, the other side also discovered it. The two groups of people would immediately rush over crazily to snatch it, quickly fighting each other. However, when this happened, the surrounding people would immediately smell blood like locusts and approach them covetously. Regardless of whose hands the stolen treasures ended up in, the onlookers would quickly judge the strength of the person who got the treasures from the fight. If the person who got the treasures was still strong enough, naturally, no one would dare to touch them. Another point was to evaluate the value of the treasure and whether it was worth risking one's life to snatch it. If the value was very high, even if the winner was strong enough, it would still be a very troublesome matter. At the same time, there would be a few groups of people following behind, looking for opportunities to snatch it. After standing on the small hill and watching the bloody fight, he realized that there were many malicious gazes staring at him, who was alone. Yu Qianqiu sneered and jumped up. He flew over the heads of those people without the slightest scruple at a distance of more than 10 meters from the ground. Such an arrogant move was indeed quite a deterrent. In addition, they couldn't see through his cultivation, so no one dared to act rashly. They watched him leave. After flying forward for a short while, he suddenly realized that there were a few more groups of people gathered in front of him. They seemed to be watching something. Yu Qianqiu didn't stand on ceremony and landed in the middle of the crowd. He immediately attracted a lot of surprised and doubtful gazes. Yu Qianqiu blatantly ignored them. He stared at the concave ground below and frowned. The situation below was the same as what he had seen before. There were two groups of people confronting each other. What made him frown was that he knew both sides of the confrontation. One side was the dozen or so people in blue who had killed Shui Mingqing's fellow disciples in the valley, and the other side was Mu Tianjiao and the others. At this time, Mu Tianjiao and the others looked a little battered and exhausted. There were only a dozen or so people left out of the more than 20 people who were surrounded by the dozen or so people in blue in the concave ground. There were two teams of people standing beside Yu Qianzhou. Both teams were unharmed, and each still had the same number of 30 people when they came in. One team was dressed in yellow, and the other team was dressed in bright red. The two young men, who were obviously the leaders of the two teams, stood side by side in a relaxed manner. They chatted casually, as if they didn't care about the dangers of the divine ruin realm at all. However, their eyes were always staring at Yu Qianzhou. The disciples of the emotion-severing sect are really strong. I heard that they were so arrogant that they split into two groups. They have already destroyed a lot of teams and snatched a lot of good things. The red-clothed young man snorted. The yellow-clothed young man said indifferently, "They are the number one sect under the Immortal Palace. It's not surprising that they are so arrogant." Chapter 8:17. Heartless Palace. The number one force under the Palace of Immortals. Yu Qianzhou's gaze swept over the two people in front of him. He had a feeling that their conversation was purposely directed at him, but he had no idea what they were talking about. Coincidentally, Huang Xiaolong's gaze met with the yellow-clothed young man. The latter nodded with a faint smile, expressing his goodwill. "This father doesn't know you, what are you smiling for?" Yu Qianzhou turned around coldly, continuing to stare at the depression below. The yellow-clothed young man smiled nonchalantly. "This woman is really stubborn, she would rather die than comply. I'm afraid Che Mingqian is gnashing his teeth in anger right now." Stubborn. The red-clothed young man snorted disdainfully. "In the end, only death awaits you. Che Mingqian won't let this matter rest." The Che Mingqian they were talking about was the leader of the group of blue-clothed men, the one who had threatened Shui Mingqing in the valley. At this time, Che Mingqian was gnashing his teeth in anger. He didn't expect to run into two people like this who would rather die together than hand over the treasure in their hands. Yu Qianzhou's gaze fell onto the fist-sized golden object in Mu Tianzhao's hand. Recalling the records in the treasure encyclopedia, he immediately remembered what it was. This object was called Golden Fulling, and according to the encyclopedia's records, it was a treasure that could increase the success rate of alchemy, greatly reducing the chance of a failed pill. Many people would add a certain amount of this when refining top-grade immortal pills. This was because the loss would be rather shocking if a defective pill appeared in a top-grade immortal pill. Golden Fulling's market price was not calculated by the piece, but by the tail. Generally, one tail was worth 100 million divine-grade spirit stones. The Golden Fulling in Mu Tianzhao's hand was at least 4 to 5 tails. In other words, it was worth 400 to 500 million divine-grade spirit stones. You better persuade her, my patience has a limit. The earlier you hand it over, I'll let you off. If you're too late, none of you will leave this place alive. Che Mingqian sneered. Of the 20 or so people hired by the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, only 13 were left after several battles. Everyone naturally knew how powerful the Heartless Palace was, and they were no match for them at all. Terrified, they all looked at Mu Tianzhao. Mu Tianzhao's beautiful hair was disheveled as she looked at everyone with a miserable expression. She smiled bitterly and said, "Don't believe his nonsense. As long as the item is still in my hands, they won't dare to do anything to us. I, Mu Tianzhao, guarantee once again that if they dare to harm any one of us, I will immediately turn this gold fulling into powder, and no one will be able to obtain it." At this time, Tao Zhong, who was guarding Mu Tianzhao, also loudly warned everyone, "Don't believe his nonsense. Even if we hand over the item, he won't let us go. As long as we still have the item, we have a chance to live." Mu Tianzhao immediately gave him a grateful look. They hadn't found anything valuable along the way and had even lost a few men. This piece of golden fulling was discovered by chance under the roots of a tree. It was also the most valuable item they had so far. As long as they brought it back, the Four Links Chamber of Commerce would be able to hold on. With her personality, how could she give up this opportunity so easily? Che Mingqian sneered and said, "Stubborn dead duck. I'll give you one last chance. If you miss it, only death awaits you." What a big tone. I want to see who will be the one to die. A cold snort echoed in the surroundings as a figure appeared in the concave in an instant. When Mu Tianjiao and the others saw who it was, they exclaimed in unison, "Yu Qianqiu." They all suspected that Yu Qianqiu was already dead after running around alone. They didn't expect to see him again at this critical moment. Yu Qianqiu's cold eyes looked at Che Mingqian and the others. Che Mingqian turned pale with fright and said, "It's you." More than a dozen men in blue subconsciously moved 10 meters away. The reaction of Che Mingqian and the others made the yellow-clothed man and red-clothed man look at each other in surprise. The surrounding people also looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know who this person was to make the disciples of Heartless Palace so afraid. Che Mingqian said angrily, "Who are you? Why do you keep going against my Heartless Palace? Do you really think my Heartless Palace is easy to bully?" If there was no one around, he would have called his fellow disciples and run away. However, under the watchful eyes of so many people, the Passionless Palace couldn't lose face as the #1 sect in the immortal world. What a joke. I'm not that bored. Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, "For Link's Chamber of Commerce is my employer. You snatched things from me. Who do you think is going against who? I didn't expect Heartless Palace to be so arrogant to the point of lying." As he spoke, his aura had already locked onto the disciples of Heartless Palace. Only now did Che Mingqian realize that Mu Tianjiao and the others had cried out the name Yu Qianqiu. Clearly, as the other party said, they were indeed in cahoots. Che Mingqian was speechless. Why was he so unlucky? He suddenly felt an aura locking onto him. This was clearly a sign of a fight. What was the difference between talking nonsense and seeking death? Without turning his head, he shouted, "Go!" The group of Heartless Palace disciples had just teleported away when they saw Yu Qianqiu snort coldly, trying to run. He opened his arms at the same time, and the surrounding air suddenly exploded with a dozen balls of white smoke.
Dense streams of light flashed out of Yu Qianqiu's sleeves and quickly drilled into a dozen or so clouds of white smoke. After flashing for a while, they quickly returned and drilled back into his sleeves. The air was filled with smoke, and the dozen storage bags fell to the ground with a thud. Yu Qianqiu said indifferently to the people of Four Links Chamber of Commerce who were dumbfounded, "No wonder Heartless Palace specializes in robberies. It's easy to get things. I think it's worth learning from them." With that said, he raised his hand and took the scattered storage bags into his hand, then put them away. The sounds of fighting could still be heard faintly in the distance, but this part of the world seemed abnormally quiet. Shock was written all over the faces of the people on the surrounding hillsides. Killing more than a dozen soul formation cultivators in an instant while teleporting away was definitely not something an immortal expert with a lower cultivation base could do. The people of Four Links Chamber of Commerce looked at Yu Qianqiu speechlessly, especially Mu Tianjiao. She now deeply suspected that Yu Qianqiu was not a soul formation cultivator at all. Such a miraculous method was definitely an immortal cultivator, and he must have used some sort of method to sneak in. After Mu Tianjiao recovered from her daze, joy surged in her eyes. With the help of such an expert, she would definitely be able to get what she wanted on this trip to the Divine Ruin Realm. She hurriedly bowed and said, "Thank you." As for whether Yu Qianqiu handed over the things he obtained, it was no longer important. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said with a smile, "You are my employer, this is my duty." As he spoke, his cold gaze swept across the surrounding spectators, full of warning. Immediately, many people quietly led their teams and left, knowing that this was no longer something they could do. However, they all secretly remembered the name Yu Qianqiu in their hearts. There were still two teams that had not left. The yellow-clothed man and the red-clothed man on the hillside looked at each other, nodded slightly, and floated over together. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and looked over. The red-clothed man cupped his fists and said, I am a disciple of mythical fire palace, Hui Yunlong. I am a disciple of spirit cultivation sect, Du Feng. The yellow-clothed man cupped his fists, glanced at Mu Tianjiao and the others, and said with a smile, other than their own people, the immortal palace will definitely not let an immortal expert in. Since you were able to enter the divine ruin realm, your cultivation base must not have reached the immortal realm, but your ability is indeed admirable. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Tao Zhong and asked telepathically, what kind of sects are the mythical fire palace and spirit cultivation sect? Tao Zhong was speechless.
He really could not imagine how such a capable person did not even know the most basic common sense. However, he did not dare to be disrespectful, and immediately replied telepathically, the immortal world has the top 50 large sects, as well as the top 50 rich families or merchant associations. The mythical fire palace and spirit cultivation sect are both within the top 50 large sections. Although they are not comparable to the heartless palace, they are very powerful. Yu Qianqiu replied with an "oh" and said, I am Yu Qianqiu, what can I do for the two of you? As he spoke, he could not help but look at Hui Yunlong. This was called not noticing, but once he paid attention, he would be shocked. He discovered that this guy had a head of red hair, especially his appearance and burly figure. He was simply printed from the same mold as the Nanming old ancestor. The only difference was that one had a beard and was a little older. If the two of them were placed together, people would definitely mistake them for father and son. If the spirit-severing experts from the various countries saw this later, who knew what their reaction would be, Du Feng smiled faintly and said, the Heartless Palace is a vengeful sect. Of course, with Brother Yu's ability, there is naturally no need to be afraid of the disciples of the Heartless Palace in the Divine Ruin Realm. I wonder which famous family Brother Yu comes from. Why have I never seen Brother Yu before? The hidden meaning in these words was very obvious. It was to tell Yu Qianqiu that the news of him slaughtering the disciples of the Heartless Palace would inevitably spread. As long as the news spread, without the protection of a famous family, the people of the Heartless Palace would definitely deal with him. I am just an unknown wandering cultivator. How would I be related to any famous family? It is normal that you have not seen me before. Yu Qianqiu said. Hui Yunlong and Du Feng looked at each other, and a strange look flashed in their eyes. Du Feng smiled and said, there are many heroes in the wilderness. Brother Yu, there is no need to belittle yourself. Moreover, how many of the founders of famous families are not wandering cultivators? Let's take the 12 great immortal monarchs in the celestial world for example. There should be 13 great immortal monarchs now. Which one of them isn't a wandering cultivator? That is why it is said that there are crouching tigers and hidden dragons among the wandering cultivators. There are often some wandering cultivators who amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. 13 great immortal monarchs. Yu Qianqiu frowned and muttered with a puzzled expression. Brother, you might not know this, but there are currently not many people who know this news. Du Feng smiled and explained, after the battle with the myriad swords demon lord, because a few immortal monarchs had fallen, a few immortal monarchs became vacant. Later on, the celestial emperor promoted a few powerful figures from the celestial world to fill the 12 immortal monarchs. Who knew that after all these years, immortal monarch Ji Wu, whom everyone thought had fallen, would return from the human world? However, it was not good to dismiss the other immortal monarchs, so there were the 13 great immortal monarchs now. Chapter 8:18. His explanation was within Yu Qianqiu's expectations, but he had misunderstood Yu Qianqiu's meaning. Yu Qianqiu asked himself, why not the 14 immortal monarchs? Since the silver ball given to immortal monarch crocodile was already in the immortal world, then immortal monarch crocodile must have also returned to the immortal world. I heard that immortal monarch crocodile came back with immortal monarch Wu Ji. Did I hear wrongly? Yu Qianqiu slowly asked without batting an eyelid. Hui Yunlong and Du Feng looked at each other in surprise. They did not expect an itinerant cultivator to know such a secret. Tao Zhong's eyes flickered. He was even more certain that Yu Qianqiu was a rich second generation. Otherwise, how could an ordinary person hear such high-level news? Du Feng sighed. Immortal monarch Crocodile was one of the top figures in the immortal world back then. Who knew that after he came back with immortal monarch Wu Ji, his cultivation level had fallen to the exalted immortal late stage by the myriad swords demon lord? With his current cultivation level, he is no longer qualified to be an immortal monarch. If not for immortal monarch Wu Ji's protection, he would have lost his life this time. Oh! Yu Qianqiu's eyes flashed, and his heart surged. However, he still wore a doubtful expression and asked, no matter what, he was one of the 12 great immortal monarchs back then. Could it be that someone wants to kill him? Du Feng looked at Hui Yunlong. The latter paused, then said slowly, the immortal monarch that the immortal emperor promoted was his old enemy. Not only did this enemy occupy immortal monarch Crocodile's immortal crocodile palace, but he also slaughtered immortal monarch Crocodile's trusted aides. I heard that because of this, immortal monarch Crocodile could not hold back his anger and spoke rudely in the palace. He talked back to the immortal emperor on the spot and was seriously injured. If not for immortal monarch Wu Ji's protection, I'm afraid immortal monarch Crocodile would have lost his life. I see. Yu Qianqiu nodded slowly, his expression slightly solemn. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Old monster, you yourself once said that there's no place for you in the immortal world. Why are you asking for trouble? However, he could understand immortal Lord Crocodile's feelings. Immortal Lord Crocodile had spent so much effort to return to the celestial world because he was confident. Perhaps he wanted to find his trusted subordinates and make a comeback. Who knew that when he returned, he would find that everything had changed. Not only had his trusted subordinates been killed by his enemies, but even his territory had been occupied by them. The most unbearable thing was that all of this was tacitly allowed by the immortal emperor that he was loyal to all those years ago. This was tantamount to breaking his last trace of hope, so how could he swallow this? It was understandable that he was impulsive. The level of the conversation between the three was too high, so Mu Tianjiao and the others had no right to interrupt. They could only listen quietly from the side. Besides, this kind of high-level grudge was not something they could usually hear. In that case, immortal Lord Crocodile, who was severely injured by the immortal emperor, has been taken away by immortal Lord Wu Ji. Yu Qianqiu asked again. It should be. Hui Yunlong nodded. Du Feng's eyebrows twitched slightly. He found that Yu Qianqiu seemed to be very concerned about immortal Lord Crocodile. He could not help but ask, Brother Yu, do you know immortal Lord Crocodile? Yu Qianqiu was startled. He said in surprise, how could I know him? I'm just a little impressed. It's the first time I've heard of someone daring to talk back to an immortal emperor. If there's a chance, I'd like to meet this audacious immortal Lord Crocodile. By the way, where is immortal Lord Wu Ji who took away immortal Lord Crocodile? Du Feng smiled. Actually, immortal Lord Wu Ji's original immortal palace has also been occupied by another immortal lord. Logically speaking, there has never been a 13th immortal lord in the celestial world since ancient times. Even if immortal Lord Wu Ji returns from the human world, it is unlikely that he will become an immortal lord again. But immortal Lord Wu Ji is a little special. At this point, he stopped, but the smile on his face was somewhat ambiguous. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, immortal Lord Wu Ji is a little special. What's so special about her? Du Feng shook his head with a smile and said nothing more. Hui Yunlong, on the other hand, snorted. What can't be said? It's something that everyone knows. The celestial world is divided into 13 celestial prefectures. Other than the one that the immortal emperor presides over, the other 12 celestial prefectures are ruled by 12 immortal lords. Humph. Now there's a 13th immortal lord. Where are we going to divide the territory for Ji Wu? Everyone knows that the immortal emperor once pursued Ji Wu and wanted to make Ji Wu the immortal empress, but Ji Wu refused. If it weren't for this relationship, the immortal emperor wouldn't have shown mercy and let Ji Wu save immortal Lord Crocodile. Damn! What big gossip! Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. The immortal emperor likes Ji Wu. When he remembered that he had touched the immortal emperor's woman, this feeling, Du Feng smiled bitterly and looked at Hui Yunlong, as if he was blaming him for speaking out of turn. Mu Tianjiao and the others were dumbfounded. No one knows whether he likes Ji Wu or not, but there's definitely something going on. Hui Yunlong chuckled. This time, there's a 13th immortal lord. Some people have already guessed that the immortal emperor wants to rule the same celestial prefecture as Ji Wu. I believe that it won't be long before the matter of the immortal empress is brought up again. In fact, immortal Lord Ji Wu herself is well aware of this and has already rejected the appointment of another immortal lord. But the immortal emperor insists, and immortal Lord Ji Wu doesn't dare to offend the immortal emperor too much. Otherwise, no matter how big the celestial world is, there's no place for her to stand. Du Feng couldn't bear it anymore. He stopped him in a low voice. Hui Yunlong, these are all your guesses. Which eye of yours saw it? Be careful. Hui Yunlong said disdainfully, all the major sects and noble families have people in the celestial palace. Many people have seen this, and I'm not the only one talking about it. Besides, no one has any disrespect for the immortal emperor. They're just exclaiming about immortal Lord Ji Wu's charm. Brother Yu, don't listen to his nonsense. Du Feng changed the topic and smiled. I advise Brother Yu to give up on the idea of meeting immortal Lord Crocodile. Although he's down and out now, he has immortal Lord Ji Wu's protection. He's not someone people like us can meet. Yu Qianqiu also knew that if he continued to talk about immortal Lord Crocodile, it would really arouse suspicion. He changed the topic and asked, the two of you must have an extraordinary status in the mythical fire palace and the spirit cultivation sect, right? As he spoke, there was a slight smile on his face as he glanced at the two groups of people standing on the hillside in an orderly manner. These people were completely different from the groups of people from the other sections. These two groups of people seemed to be the subordinates of Du Feng and Hui Yunlong. Without receiving orders, they did not dare to move. Clearly, they did not have the kind of relationship that disciples from the same sect would have. Without a doubt, these two people had extraordinary statuses. Du Feng shook his head and smiled bitterly. Our status is a little bit different. Both of us are blood relatives of our respective sect leaders. The sect leader is our ancestor. But you also know that there are countless blood relatives like us in the various sects, so there's really nothing strange about it. Yu Qianqiu softly said, oh. He could understand this. The immortal world was different from the human world. If there were no accidents, the old guys in the immortal world would be old men who wouldn't die. After countless years, they would probably have countless children and grandchildren. However, he couldn't help but look at the two teams of people on the hillside. He had a feeling that things weren't as simple as Du Feng said. Du Feng clearly saw through his doubts, so he waved his hand and said, Brother Yu, please don't misunderstand. Our fathers just happened to hold some positions in their respective sects, and these people are all disciples under our fathers.
Brother, you will naturally understand the reason when you have the chance in the future. Yu Qianqiu looked at the two of them and said with a smile, it can't be that the two of you are looking for me just to chat about family matters, right? Du Feng looked at Hui Yunlong and said with a hearty smile, the disciples of all the major sects in the ruins of God have gathered here. It has already become a place of trouble. Brother Yunlong and I were afraid that it wouldn't be safe, so we joined forces. I believe that there are many sects that are doing the same thing as us. As he said that, he swept his gaze across the people from the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and asked, "I wonder if the Four Links Chamber of Commerce is interested in joining forces with us to search for treasures. The treasures obtained will be divided equally among the three sections. What does brother Yu think? I'm only being hired by the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. I can't make the decision on this matter. I'm afraid." Yu Qianqiu stared at Mu Tianjiao. Before he could finish speaking, Mu Tianjiao took a step forward and bowed to him, saying, "Mr. Yu, please make the decision." Mu Tianjiao will listen to Mr.'s instructions. She could be considered a smart person. She naturally knew that the reason why large sects like the Mythical Flame Palace and the Spirit Cultivation sect were willing to take the initiative to cooperate was definitely not because of her Four Links Chamber of Commerce. A small chamber of commerce like the Four Links Chamber of Commerce would probably not even be willing to look them in the eye. Furthermore, they wanted to give a huge benefit to the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. It was nothing more than giving face to Yu Qianqiu. She naturally had to tactfully take the initiative to give up her authority. As long as she could tie down Yu Qianqiu, many problems would no longer be a problem. Du Feng and Hui Yunlong glanced at Mu Tianjiao and smiled at each other. They discovered that this woman was really a smart person. Yu Qianqiu stared at Mu Tianjiao and fell into a short silence. To be honest, he rather admired this woman and did not wish for anything to happen to her in this dangerous place. Besides, he also wanted to make friends with two large sections. After all, he was too unfamiliar with the immortal world and needed a starting point. He paused and said, "Since that's the case, I'll make the decision on behalf of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. I hope that the Mythical Flame Palace and the Spirit Cultivation sect will take good care of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce." Ha! Brother Yu is indeed a straightforward person. Hui Yunlong laughed. Du Feng also laughed and said, "Since it's a cooperation, everyone naturally has to take care of each other." Yu Qianqiu also followed the two of them and politely said.
He understood in his heart that these two fellows would definitely not stick to him for no reason. They definitely had a purpose, but he did not point it out. He wanted to see what exactly these two fellows were plotting. After the three parties exchanged pleasantries, under Yu Qianqiu's decision, the three teams of people continued to head deeper into the divine ruin realm. Mu Tianjiao, who had increased her confidence, happily led her people to take the lead. Tao Zhong and the others who were hired also heaved a sigh of relief. Now that they had joined forces with the people from the two great sects, the risk of danger for everyone would be greatly reduced. Furthermore, there was an expert like Yu Qianqiu holding the line. Chapter 8:19. The disciples of the Mythical Fire Palace and the Spirit Cultivation sect advanced in a formation on the left and right of the Four Links Merchant Guild. Yu Qianqiu, Du Feng, and Hui Yunlong followed behind them. The dense spiritual qi formed a mist that drifted in all directions, and exotic flowers and plants could be seen everywhere. The surroundings seemed to be forever white, and the sun, moon, and stars could not be seen. What surprised Yu Qianqiu the most was that he realized that there was no night here. No matter how much time had passed, it was always white. It made people feel like they were trapped in a nightmare that they couldn't break free from. It was so unreal. When he asked Du Feng and Hui Yunlong, the two of them were also confused about this strange phenomenon. It was said that ever since the day the Divine Ruins realm opened, the Divine Ruins realm had always been like this. Many people had the same doubts, but no one could figure out what was going on. On the way, Yu Qianqiu discovered that the major sects were truly major sections. Their deterrence was clearly not ordinary. Some of the people with ill intentions would immediately retreat when they saw the disciples of the Fire Palace and Spirit Cultivation sect taking a detour. This was not because the disciples of the two great sects had high cultivation bases. After all, the disciples of the various sects that entered the ruins of God had similar cultivation bases. The key was that they could not afford to provoke their backers. Otherwise, even if they gained an advantage in the ruins of God, it would bring disaster to their sects when they went out. The fighting and killing in the surroundings was endless. Tens of thousands of sects and hundreds of thousands of people were fighting with each other. It would be strange if they could live in peace. In short, it was those small sects that suffered from the calamity. They tried their best to hide and search for rare treasures, but they would always run into robbers who blocked their way. What he saw and heard along the way confirmed the saying that the weak were prey to the strong. The teams with weak backgrounds were angry, but they were forced to hide and flee. The teams with strong backgrounds were unscrupulously robbing the bright tribulations. Of course, the disciples of those big sects were not just for show. The sects behind them could stand tall in the immortal world without collapsing, so naturally, they had the ability to show off. The techniques that the disciples cultivated must be unique, and this was also the capital for them to be arrogant. Yu Qianqiu sighed, but he laughed coldly in his heart. He wanted to go back and see how the 300 people he brought were doing. He wondered if they had gotten used to it. But after thinking about it, he dispelled this idea. Although those 300 people came from the human world of cultivation, none of them were easy to deal with. They were all people who struggled to survive in the narrow space of the human world. The disciples of the various sects in the immortal world with superior conditions couldn't compare to them. Those 300 people could be said to be the elites of the elites in the world. As long as they had a suitable cultivation base as a guarantee, they could be thrown anywhere in the immortal world and become an ambitious and ruthless person. The reason why he brought them here this time was to let them go through a period of adaptation from the human world to the immortal world, and eliminate their subconscious fear of the immortal world after living in the human world for a long time. As long as these people's mentality was right, they would be of great use in the immortal world in the future, and they would become his right-hand men. He needed to slowly control and grasp the process. In fact, Yu Qianqiu's initial plan was to wait for the divine ruin realm to be open for a month before bringing the Utopia army here to search for spirit herbs. However, there was a very practical worry that made him dispel this idea. Once the divine ruin realm was closed, no one knew what the situation inside was like. Furthermore, every member of the Utopia army was only at the tribulation stage, so they couldn't afford to take too much risk. However, he was eager to obtain the immortal herbs that could make him rich. There was definitely a limit to one person's ability, so he set his sights on the soul formation stage lords of the various countries. These people had more experience than the members of the Utopia army. To put it bluntly, the Utopia army could be used as the core combat power, but it was not suitable for them to go out and fight alone. In addition, the Immortal Palace restricted the entry of the various sects, so the Divine Ruin Realm became the best place for the lords of the various countries to train. Mu Tianjiao had just led a group of people over a small hill when they saw a group of people vigilantly looking around. In the middle of the group, a few people were quickly digging out a white plant root that was as thick as an arm from under a rock. There were only 20 people in this group, and when they suddenly realized that a group of people had appeared on the hill and were staring at them, they immediately became nervous. After seeing that it was Mu Tianjiao who was leading the group, the person holding the white plant root was stunned. He quickly stuffed the thing into his storage bracelet, then chuckled and said, "Enemies always meet. I was looking everywhere for your 4 links chamber of commerce, but I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to me." This person was called Li Lanting, and he was none other than the leader of the 8 links chamber of commerce's team to enter the Divine Ruin Realm. Before entering, he had received a warning from the 8 links chamber of commerce's president, Qi Fengxing. If they met anyone from the 4 links chamber of commerce, they were to kill them all. Mu Tianjiao was also stunned. She didn't expect to meet people from the 8 links chamber of commerce under such circumstances. Almost as soon as their gazes met, a fierce look flashed across Mu Tianjiao's pretty face. She waved the silver shield in her hand and decisively shouted, "Kill." As soon as the words left her mouth, she rushed toward the other party without hesitation. Tao Zhong and the others were stunned. This group of people had always been hiding and keeping a low profile, and they had never taken the initiative to attack anyone. Mu Tianzhao had always been cautious, leading everyone on the edge of danger with fear and trepidation. They didn't expect that she would go crazy now. Everyone was stunned for a moment, but they immediately remembered that they had a powerful backer behind them. They immediately shot out and took the initiative to attack. The playful smile on Li Lanting's face froze, and he looked a little stunned. It was already good that he didn't settle the score with them, but the Four Links Chamber of Commerce actually took the initiative to come to their deaths when they were at a disadvantage. He immediately shouted with a ferocious expression, "Attack!" The two groups of people quickly and fiercely collided, pushing the battle to its climax. Although Mu Tianzhao's figure was petite and looked like a weak woman, she was like a completely different person when she was fierce. She stared at Li Lanting with no regard for her life, and with the silver shield protecting her body, she entangled Li Lanting and fought with all her might. In the end, it gave Li Lanting a fright, and she was almost unable to withstand the blows. She retreated as she dealt with them, shouting, "Stop her." After all, the 8 Links Chamber of Commerce had the advantage in numbers, and had a few more people than the 4 Links Chamber of Commerce. Hearing Li Lanting's shout, a few people immediately dashed over to intercept Mu Tianzhao. Mu Tianzhao, who had been attacking wildly, immediately fell into a dangerous situation. Dealing with 4 people at the same time was already beyond her ability. Fortunately, she had 2 treasures in her hands. The silver shield for defense glowed with a silver light, and in the blink of an eye, it had already blocked several fatal attacks for her. Because of her fearless bravery, it immediately reduced the pressure on the other team members. Apart from her, who was fighting 1 against 4, the other team members were fighting 1-on-1. In such a critical situation, Mu Tianzhao should be thinking of a way to escape, but she raised her cultivation to the limit and fought with all her might under the siege of 4 men. She was actually far from being as strong as she appeared to be. Her heart was like her appearance, just a weak woman. She also wanted to live the life of the young miss of another family. But the 4 Links Chamber of Commerce was already in a precarious situation. Her father's character was weak, and it was not enough to support the overall situation. She believed that as an only daughter, she had no way out. At this time, she could only constantly strive for self-improvement. Hence, she shouldered the heavy burden without any hesitation, and decided to shield her father from the wind and rain. The attacks from the 4 people surrounding her were like a mountain. The web between Mu Tianzhao's thumb and forefinger had already split open from the impact, and fresh blood flowed out. But she still gritted her teeth with a pale face. She knew that Yu Qianqiu and the rest would see it soon, because they were not far from her team. She knew that at this time, she had to become stronger. She could not let everyone look down on her. She had to hold on, and let everyone see that even though she was a woman, she did not lose to a man. She knew that if she wanted to gain the respect of others, she had to do things that would make others look at her in a different light. Otherwise, respect would not come even if one begged for it. She knew that this was an opportunity for the 4 Links Chamber of Commerce. Borrowing her relationship with Yu Qianqiu, if her contribution could gain the favor of the mythical Flame Palace and the Spirit Cultivation Sect, and establish a certain relationship after the matter, even if it was just a little bit of cooperation, then the 4 Links Chamber of Commerce would be able to walk out of this dangerous situation. Her thinking was not wrong. In order to gain, there must be a price to pay. But for a woman like her to do such a thing, it was a little too heavy. That delicate shout of "kill" came from afar, and in addition to the intense sounds of fighting that followed, it immediately alerted Yu Qianqiu and the other 2. The 3 of them looked at each other, and immediately flew up, directly to the hillside in front of them. Scanning the battlefield, the 3 of them immediately fixed their gazes on Mu Tianzhao, who was surrounded by 4 men. Mu Tianzhao's figure was originally petite, and at this moment, under the frenzied attacks of 4 men, she looked so helpless. Her resistance was already very messy, and it was obvious that she was barely holding on. But even so, she still fought to the death without retreating, and in the midst of her messy resistance, she did not forget to find time to counterattack. That unyielding aura caused Du Feng and Hui Yunlong to be slightly shocked. They saw something that was rare even in the immortal world, and that thing was called backbone. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes as he stared below. He could already see the background of the other party from their clothing. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, 8 Links Chamber of Commerce again, they are really tired of living. The commotion of the battle naturally alerted the mythical Flame Palace and Spirit Cultivation sect disciples on both sides. 2 groups of people appeared from the left and right, and their gazes were fixed on their respective leaders. Du Feng and Hui Yunlong's eyes flashed with killing intent as they shouted in unison, "Kill!" The disciples of the 2 great sects rapidly formed an encirclement, and quickly joined the battle. The situation was instantly reversed. "Ah!" A few screams rang out. Li Lanting looked at the figures that were flashing in all directions, and anxiously shouted, "Everyone, please show mercy. We can discuss this, as long as we have it, we can give it to you." Hui Yunlong's pair of fiery red eyebrows raised, and he angrily said, "I want your life. Kill them all, don't leave a single one alive." As he gave the command, a red light erupted from below. The bodies of the Lifire Palace's disciples all released 2 balls of red fireballs that danced in the air. Chapter 820. As soon as the fist-sized fireballs appeared, they nimbly shot towards the disciples of the Bada Chamber of Commerce. Li Lanting exclaimed, "Mythical Fire Palace! Retreat! Don't touch it!" Unfortunately, it was too late. Many of the Bada Chamber of Commerce's disciples subconsciously released their flying swords to block the fireball. Who knew that when the flying swords hit the fireball would immediately collapse into countless stars? The exploding sparks seemed to have a mind of their own as they drew lines of fire towards the attackers. The 8th Pagoda Chamber of Commerce disciple was shocked and immediately released his chi of vigor to defend himself. Who would have thought that the sparks would not be extinguished? They swarmed over and touched the chi of vigor, causing the fire to rise. In an instant, the person hiding in the chi of vigor was wrapped into a bright red fireball. There were also disciples of the Bada Chamber of Commerce who were trying to teleport away. However, the sparks that were scattered all around had already sealed off the surroundings. There was no space for them to teleport safely. Those disciples of the Bada Chamber of Commerce who had underestimated the power of the sparks immediately suffered a calamity. They crashed into the sparks that were densely woven like a net and were instantly ignited into flames. Ah! Several mournful screams rang out as the people on fire struggled in the air, trying to extinguish the flames on their bodies. However, these flames were extremely fierce. They were like maggots that could not be extinguished at all. They wrapped around their bodies and burned crazily. These people did not fly far before they saw rays of mysterious light shooting out from the hands of the Spirit Cultivation sect disciples, killing the people on fire who were trying to escape. After these flaming men fell to the ground with a thud, they struggled a little and then stopped moving. Piles of flames burned on the undulating hills around them, and a burnt smell filled the air. Yu Qianqiu's gaze fell on the hands of the Spirit Cultivation sect disciples. He saw that each of them was holding a long and narrow silver token in one hand. It was about 2 feet long, wide at the top and narrow at the bottom, and the wider it was, the thinner it was. The sharp end was like an iron pestle in one's hand, and the cloud pattern on the token was engraved with the word Spirit. The mysterious light that shot out from the hands of the Spirit Cultivation sect disciples was this item. This was the first time that Yu Qianqiu had seen someone use this as a magic treasure. At this moment, the Spirit Cultivation sect disciples suddenly shouted in unison, "Break!" The token in his hand had already transformed into a beam of light and shot out. Its sharp tip was like a steel needle that had punctured a balloon, easily piercing through the 8 Pagoda Chamber of Commerce's disciples' protective aura. As soon as the protective aura was broken, the raging flames immediately collapsed and converged, instantly attaching to the person inside and burning. Ah! Miserable screams rang out as the mystic light shot into the raging flames, easily piercing through them and immediately ending the ear-piercing screams. One by one, the burning men fell to the ground, emitting a disgusting burnt smell. The members of the 4 Links Chamber of Commerce stood there blankly. Once the 2 great sects made their move, they no longer had the chance to intervene. In the blink of an eye, the battle was over. Compared to their bitter struggle, the methods of the 2 sects were indeed much stronger. Yu Qianzhou's gaze landed on the burning corpses, revealing a thoughtful expression. He was previously shocked by the fire-controlling methods of the mythical Fire Palace disciples. Only later did he realize that there was something in the fireball that was released. It should be something similar to oil. It was not as he had thought, that they could use the same method to control the flames as he did. After it was over, Mu Tianjiao flew over with her messy hair. She bowed to Du Feng and Hui Yunlong. "Thank you for your help, otherwise, Mu Tianjiao would have lost my life here. Miss Mu, you're too polite. We're allies, so it's only natural for us to help each other." Du Feng paused as he stared at Mu Tianjiao's bloody palm. He frowned and asked, "Is Miss Mu's hand all right?" Hui Yunlong, who was at the side, had already taken out a fragrant immortal pill and handed it over. "The effect of this immortal pill is not bad. It will be good for your injury if you consume it." This. Mu Tianjiao hesitated for a moment, but still accepted it with gratitude. She consumed it in front of everyone, not afraid of being poisoned. Hui Yunlong immediately laughed. "Miss Mu is a straightforward person." Yu Qianzhou's nose twitched slightly, as if he could faintly smell the fragrance of another immortal pill. He glanced to his side and happened to see that Du Feng was also holding an immortal pill in his hand. However, seeing that Hui Yunlong was already 1 step ahead of him, the immortal pill was gently grasped and hidden in his palm, no longer letting others see it. There was a faint and calm smile on his face. Yu Qianzhou raised his brows, looking left and right at the 2 fellows' gazes. He discovered that the way they looked at Mu Tianjiao seemed to be a little strange. They had lost the calmness from before, and there were a few hints of peculiarity in their eyes. The corners of Yu Qianzhou's mouth curled up, revealing a smile that he did not reveal. He then said with a solemn expression, "This 8 Pagoda Chamber of Commerce is really despicable. I'm afraid that's the reason why they left." Du Feng slowly said in a low voice, "If we can join forces, it doesn't mean that they can't do the same. With the rallying power of Heartless Palace, if they really want to gather people to join forces, I'm afraid we'll be in trouble." Yu Qianzhou watched as the mythical Fire Palace disciples below scattered white powder to extinguish the flames on the corpses, then searched for the storage bags and storage bracelets that were burnt black. As he looked, he took out a piece of white jade and played with it in his hand. He slowly said, "If trouble comes, we'll solve it. There's nothing to worry about." After he said so, the others didn't say anything else. The 3 parties continued to move forward to search for rare treasures. However, Du Feng and Hui Yunlong agreed that the 4 Links Chamber of Commerce couldn't be the vanguard anymore. With regards to this, Yu Qianzhou didn't have any objections and let Mu Tianjiao lead her people to follow behind the 2 major sections. However, some things were always like this. Good things didn't come true, but bad things came true. After half a day, the 3 parties that were searching for rare treasures all stopped and stared blankly ahead. Yu Qianzhou and the other 2 looked at each other and quickly moved to the front of the group. After seeing the situation clearly, Du Feng and Hui Yunlong's expressions instantly changed. There were 7 groups of people standing quietly in a fan shape in front of them. The group in the middle was the Heartless Palace disciples that had left after meeting each other. Guan Tianli's expression was solemn as he looked at them coldly. After lightly waving his hand, the two groups of people on both sides quickly spread out and surrounded Yu Qianqiu and the others. After the 7 teams dispersed, Yu Qianqiu looked around and roughly estimated that there were at least 160 to 70 people, which was more than 100 people than them. The mythical fire palace and spirit cultivation sect disciples quickly retreated and formed a circle to guard the outside. Mu Tianzhao bit her lips lightly and didn't say a word. Tao Zhong and the others were already shocked. Guan Tianli, what do you mean by this? Du Feng shouted. At the same time he shouted, a "Kacha" sound was heard. Yu Qianqiu crushed the white jade in his hand into powder. Guan Tianli looked at them and said indifferently, Du Feng, Hui Yunlong, when I met you before, I was already warning you. Who knew that you wouldn't know what's good for you and still mixed with the people who killed my heartless palace disciples? This is clearly a disgrace to my heartless palace. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being impolite. The large triangular formation formed by over 300 demigod realm lords had already picked up their pace. First of all, they had more or less memorized the illustrations in the Jade archives, so they didn't have to stop and compare them. Secondly, they also realized that they had been following behind others to pick up scraps. The front had already been swept by others once, and the good stuff had already been taken by others. What they had found were things that were not of high value. Hence, everyone's thoughts flew to the front. It was also at this time that Yunnan Tian, who was at the front, couldn't hold back his anger and couldn't help but attack a group of people who were passing by. He lit up the fire, and in the end, over 100 people swarmed forward. In just a few seconds, the group of people were all killed with a "Kacha" sound. In the end, when they checked the results of the battle, they discovered that there was an immortal herb worth over 10 million divine-grade spirit stones in one of the people's storage pouches. Chapter 8:21. An immortal herb worth 10 million divine-grade spirit stones might not be much in the world of immortals, but to these smugglers from the human world, it was undoubtedly an unbelievable amount of wealth. It was like a group of poor people who usually only had cornbread to eat, and they were suddenly served a table full of Manchu Han imperial feast. The immortal herb was carefully stored away. Everyone was nervous, excited, and agitated, and they began to act crazily. Relying on their numbers, they would snatch it from anyone they met. After a few rounds of work, under everyone's nervous cooperation, they suddenly realized something strange. After a few rounds of work, the fights were obviously thrilling and intense, and even scared everyone out of their wits. But the strange thing was, no one was injured. It was like seeing a ghost. Most of the 300 people were in the middle stage of the soul-forming stage, and the opponents they met were mostly in the late stage. According to the understanding of the cultivation world, a late-stage soul-forming stage should be able to defeat many middle-stage soul-forming stage cultivators, but the late-stage soul-forming stage cultivators here gave everyone a strange feeling. They looked like tigers, and their momentum and methods were scary enough, but when they really fought, they gave off the feeling of a sick cat. It was really a waste of their cultivation. Lu Yanqing was most disgusted by everyone's fighting and killing, but she also knew that she might be able to make decisions for others, but not for Yu Qianqiu. In the beginning, when people came to hand over the things they stole, she would always advise everyone to stop fighting and killing, but now that everyone had tasted the sweetness, and their confidence was at its peak, how could they give up so easily? But it was not good to reject her, so someone immediately brought up Yu Qianqiu, saying, "We have no choice. I don't want to fight and kill either. But we can't disobey the torture envoy. Why don't you tell the torture envoy, as long as he says something, we will stop immediately." Lu Yanqing was speechless. How could she persuade Yu Qianqiu? That guy had never taken her, the world's most beautiful woman, seriously. Everyone was a wily old fox, and when they saw that bringing up Yu Qianqiu was useful, they all followed suit, making Lu Yanqing speechless. Lu Yanqing had no choice but to pretend that she did not hear or see anything. She focused all her energy on the Jade Archive and the immortal herbs that everyone had sent over. After a massacre, the surroundings were a mess. Yunnan, who was wearing a white velvet robe, glanced at the corpses on the ground gracefully and said to himself with a mocking expression, "The cultivators of the immortal realm are just as so." His gaze fell on a severed hand at his feet. He opened his palm and immediately grabbed the severed hand. He slowly pulled off a storage bracelet from his severed hand and casually threw it away. Then, he took out a piece of white silk cloth and blew a few hot breaths on the storage bracelet. While watching everyone collect the spoils of war, he wiped the storage bracelet with the white silk cloth. Only after wiping the storage bracelet until it was shiny did he put it on his left hand. He tossed the white handkerchief aside and raised his right hand and left hand side by side. There was a storage bracelet on each of his wrists, making for an interesting contrast. Yunnan smiled with satisfaction. At this moment, Shu Axayan of the Womanland flashed to his side. She stared at the two bracelets on his wrists and frowned. "Yunnan, we agreed that we would hand over the items and then distribute them together. Why are you wearing them on your own wrist?" Yunnan said disapprovingly, "Who said I wasn't going to hand them over? I just wanted to try them on first." "You don't say. Things from the immortal realm are really good. It's too ugly to wear a storage bag on one's body. Look at this bracelet. It has a lot of space inside. The most important thing is that it's beautiful and elegant. It's no different from an ornament. I like it. If I can give one to each of my female disciples, I believe they will look good on their hands." Shu Axayan handed the storage pouch to him with a look of disdain and said, "This is what we collected. Send it over." Yunnan withdrew his hands into his fluffy sleeves and frowned. "Your old lover, Nongzhu, is in there. You can send it yourself." "Why do you want me to send it? I'm not your subordinate. I can go by myself." A trace of pain flashed across Shu Axayan's face. She gritted her teeth and said, "He killed 3 of my sworn brothers. I don't want to see him again." Yunnan was stunned. Then he remembered that Nongzhu killed Hua Zongming and others on Xian Island. He shook his head slightly and said, "Shu Axayan, let me give you a piece of advice. Let bygones be bygones. Now the most important thing is to work together and not to have internal strife. Think about how many pioneers in the cultivation world dream of achieving immortality. Unfortunately, they can't get it. Now the opportunity is right in front of you. You should think about it carefully. Who said I want to have internal strife? I just don't want to see him again." Shu Axayan carried the storage pouch and said angrily, "Are you going or not?" Yunnan sneered and said, "A woman should act like a woman. You look like a tigress. No wonder Nongzhu doesn't want you." "What did you say?" Shu Axayan roared crazily. Yunnan snatched the storage pouch from her hand and disappeared instantly. When he came to the center of the triangular formation, he immediately found Nongzhu and complained, "Nongzhu, Shu Axayan is too unreasonable. You should discipline her." "Aren't you afraid of causing a war between sects?" Guan Tianli said indifferently, "Du Feng, you think too highly of yourself. Do you think that the mythical fire palace and the spirit cultivation sect will start a war with the various sects for the two of you?" Hui Yunlong flew into a rage. "Guan Tianli, don't go overboard. Who doesn't know that your heartless palace's people are plundering and slaughtering disciples of other sects in the ruins of God? Could it be that you are allowed to kill others and others are not allowed to kill your heartless palace's disciples?" Guan Tianli snorted, "I didn't say that others are not allowed to kill my heartless palace's disciples. As long as they have the ability, they can come and take revenge on my heartless palace. Could it be that they don't have the ability to take revenge, and they don't allow my heartless palace to take revenge?" You guys killed all the disciples that entered the ruins of God, what will they use to take revenge on you? Hui Yunlong roared. Guan Tianli shook his head slightly. That's because they don't have the ability. Don't tell me you want to blame it on my heartless palace. You. Hui Yunlong was so angry that he was speechless. The eyes of Yu Qianqiu, who was constantly paying attention to the rear, lit up. He saw two figures descend from the top of a mountain not far away. Nong Zhu and Hu Changshou had already arrived first. Actually, this place was not far from where the hundreds of people were. It was only a few dozen kilometers away. With their cultivation, it would not take long for them to rush over at full speed. Yu Qianqiu looked around at the crowd that had gathered to watch the show, and immediately secretly sent a sound transmission to the two of them. After making some arrangements, Nong Zhu quickly flew back, leaving Hu Changshou to watch. Yu Qianqiu, who had been silent all this while, walked out from between the two of them and shouted at Guan Tianli, surnamed Guan, don't bully others just because you have more people. I am the one who killed the people of your heartless palace, it has nothing to do with them. If you have the ability, then come at me alone. Whether it's one-on-one or all at once, I will accept it. Guan Tianli said indifferently, I heard that your methods are extraordinary, I don't dare to take that risk, it's safer to bully others with numbers. As he spoke, he looked at the two sides and said, everyone, what are you waiting for, let's make our move. At this moment, someone shouted from afar, bully others with numbers. Good. This is my favorite thing, let us join in the fun. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice, only to see a group of densely packed figures flying over from behind the mountain. Chapter 8:22. Hundreds of silhouettes scattered in the sky, surrounding Yu Qianqiu's group of more than 100 people. Everything happened so suddenly that the surroundings fell silent in an instant. Everyone looked at the group of people who had appeared out of thin air and discovered that each of them had an unruly aura. Their clothes were all different, and it was impossible to tell which sect they were from. Nongzhu stood on a small hill and looked down. She secretly transmitted her voice to Yu Qianqiu. Did it feel good to be a loyal and righteous person just now? Then she asked loudly, who was the one who said they were bullying us with numbers? I like it very much, so I came to see who has more people. Damn it. If there was a chance to be a good person, it would be a waste not to do it. Yu Qianqiu immediately pointed at Guan Tianli and said, he said it. He is bullying us with numbers. Ha! Nongzhu rubbed her hands and said excitedly, good. Let's learn from each other. The people who were invited by the passionless palace suddenly became restless. No one expected such a thing to happen. In the blink of an eye, they were surrounded, and all of them were on guard. The people who were watching from afar also became restless. They knew there was a big show to watch. Some of them even hoped that these people would fight to the death so that they could take advantage of the situation. Guan Tianli's pupils suddenly shrank. He stared at Du Feng and Hui Yunlong and said, so you still have some tricks up your sleeves. No wonder you dared to mix with the people who killed the Passionless Palace's disciples. You purposely lured me to take the bait. I admire you. Du Feng and Hui Yunlong looked at each other in dismay. The two of them had no idea where Nongzhu and the rest came from. The blank expressions on their faces showed that they didn't know if they were happy or lucky. The disciples of the mythical fire palace and the spirit cultivation sect also looked at each other. Everyone was confused and didn't know what was going on. Guan Tianli furrowed his brows. From the expressions of Du Feng and the others, he could see that the two groups of people were not together at all. He immediately cupped his hands at Nongzhu and said, I am Guan Tianli, a disciple of the Passionless Palace. I wonder which sect you are from. We have no enmity in the past, so there is no need to make things difficult. As long as brother is magnanimous, my heartless palace will definitely remember this favor. His words sounded like he was using the heartless palace to scare them, but these people didn't even know what the Heartless Palace was. Nongzhu followed Yu Qianzhou's instructions and turned her head to look at Shui Mingqing beside her. Shui Mingqing immediately took a step forward, stared at Guan Tianli and roared angrily, "Guan Tianli, who said we have no enmity in the past? My Skyward Palace's disciples were killed by your Heartless Palace's Che Mingqian, and I'm the only one left. I might as well tell you that these friends from various sects were all invited by me to take revenge." When he stood in the crowd, no one recognized him at first. When he stood out from the crowd, some people in the crowd who were watching the fun immediately began to talk about him, saying that they had seen Shui Mingqing and that he was indeed a disciple of the Palace of Heaven. Now the crowd was in an uproar. They didn't expect that the Heartless Palace would be so cruel that they even dared to kill the people of the Palace of Heaven. The Palace of Heaven was not an ordinary sect, but the #1 alchemy sect in the immortal world. In fact, as soon as Shui Mingqing arrived here and saw Yu Qianzhou and Nongzhu's performance, he immediately realized that he had been used by them. But he had no other choice. Besides, he also wanted to do this. As long as he could avenge the death of his fellow disciples, not to mention that he could not vent his anger, even if he did not bring back the rare treasures, he would still be famous when he returned to the sect, and his future in the Skyward Palace would be bright. A big sect like theirs was actually not short of money. Sometimes, face was more important than treasures and money, that's right. Nongzhu looked around at the crowd and said loudly, "Although we have more than 300 brothers here from various sects, we have all been helped by the Palace of Heaven. Today, there are disciples of the Palace of Heaven reporting the funeral, which shocked us greatly. I didn't expect such an inhumane thing to happen. Since the disciples of the Palace of Heaven are begging us, it's time for us to repay their kindness. Brothers, don't you think so?" Yes. More than 300 lords waved their arms and shouted with righteous indignation. In their hearts, however, they were all laughing. How many years had it been since they played such childish tricks? The onlookers were speechless. The Palace of Heaven was indeed the Palace of Heaven, worthy of being the #1 alchemy sect in the immortal world. As long as they left one person alive, they would immediately attract a large number of helpers to take revenge. Oh my! More than 300 sects all sent people to fight back. This momentum was even stronger than that of the Heartless Palace. The most terrifying thing that everyone thought of was that if something happened to someone from these more than 300 sects, would other people come to take revenge? More than 300 sects had entered the realm of the divine ruin, which was close to 10,000 people. Even 1/10 of them was not a joke. Guan Tianli's expression darkened. He stared at Shui Mingqing and said slowly, "Brother Shui, I'm afraid there's some misunderstanding in this matter. However, since it has already happened, the Heartless Palace will not shirk responsibility. I will definitely report to the sect after this. I believe that the Heartless Palace will definitely give your Palace of Heaven an explanation. I hope that Brother Shui won't let the misunderstanding between our sects deepen. After all, there are so many pairs of eyes watching here. If the matter gets out of hand, it's impossible for it not to spread." What he meant was that he was using the name of the Heartless Palace to oppress people again. Hui Yunlong immediately laughed and said, "Guan Tianli, didn't you just say that anyone who has the ability to take revenge on the Heartless Palace can come? Why, are you afraid now?" The 6 sects that Guan Tianli had invited to help were already exchanging glances with each other, as if they wanted to take the opportunity to escape. Yu Qianzhou, who was silently observing the surroundings, narrowed his eyes and immediately transmitted his voice to Nongzhu and the others, "Why are you talking nonsense with them? Kill them." Guan Tianli glanced around and snorted coldly, "Shui Mingqing, you better think this through. Although we only have 160 to 170 people, we have many soul transformation final stage experts. Although you've invited many people, most of them are only at the soul transformation middle stage. It's not certain who will win." He was trying to calm the other 6 sections. Just as Nongju was about to make the first move, Yu Qianqiu suddenly shouted from below, *T. Don't forget that there are still the three of us. Give me your lives. Before he finished speaking, he had already shot towards the people of the Heartless Palace. A group of densely packed black shadows burst out from his sleeves. The lords of the various countries couldn't hold back any longer and wanted to make a move. Nongju had just given the signal, but Yu Qianqiu had already ignited the fire first. Not to be outdone, everyone immediately swarmed to attack. Mu Tianjiao clenched her teeth and slammed her sword against her shield. With a clang, she shouted, "Kill!" She had already made up her mind to fight for the future of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, so she did not want to be outdone. Seeing that she had already rushed out, Du Feng and Hui Yunlong shouted almost at the same time, "Kill!" Rumble. The earth shook and loud noises rang out continuously. The few groups of people madly collided with each other. With the addition of the mythical fire palace, there was suddenly fire everywhere, and the place instantly became a pot of porridge. The surrounding people who were watching the battle quickly retreated, afraid of being implicated. The group of people from the Heartless Palace shot out their flying swords at the same time. No one knew what their flying swords were made of, but they actually blocked the attack of the black flame flying swords. Guan Tianli shouted angrily, "Kill him first." The flying swords that shook off the black flame flying swords immediately rushed over with the force of thunder. The joint attack of 15 experts at the soul transformation final stage was no small matter. Just the momentum alone was almost enough to make it hard for Yu Qianqiu to open his eyes. Nongju, who had taken the time to glance over, was shocked. Just as she was about to break away from her opponents to help, she saw Yu Qianqiu push out his palms in the air, and the 15 flying swords instantly shattered into silver powder. Immediately after that, Yu Qianqiu shouted angrily, "Want to run?" Absorbing Star's great skill. Before he finished speaking, 15 clouds of white smoke exploded in the air. The black flame flying swords that were shaken away were like a flock of crows fighting for food, and they respectively burrowed into the 15 clouds of white smoke. Before the white smoke dispersed, hundreds of black flame flying swords had already followed Yu Qianqiu to another place where the battle was going on. Such a ferocious scene made many people shiver uncontrollably. When the white smoke dissipated, only 15 storage bracelets fell to the ground. As for Guan Tianli and the other 15 people, they were already nowhere to be seen. Nongju, who had used the shape displacement transposition technique, was really speechless. The strength of Yu Qianqiu had already exceeded her imagination. One absorbing star's great skill actually killed 15 experts at the soul transformation final stage at the same time. In her grief and indignation, she resolutely turned around and caught her opponents to vent her anger. However, to the soul transformation final stage experts from the various countries, the scene of Yu Qianqiu killing the 15 experts at the soul transformation final stage instantly made them feel refreshed, and they felt a sense of pride. This is our world's #1 expert. Of course he's powerful. However, this scene was no different from a nightmare to the remaining disciples of the 6 sections. When they saw Yu Qianqiu rushing over with a group of flying swords, they were instantly scared out of their wits. They were already in a situation where they were outnumbered, and they were barely able to put up a fight. As soon as Yu Qianqiu arrived, they panicked and were instantly beaten to death by the people surrounding them. They died such an unjust death. When there was no work to be done in one area, Yu Qianqiu immediately flew to another area. However, wherever he flew to, there was a sea of dead and injured people there, and he didn't even have a chance to help. After this jinx had gone one round, the battle was over. The various feudal lords were already in a complete mess, and they were frantically fighting over the storage bracelets and storage pouches from the corpses. This scene had Du Feng and the others completely dumbfounded. When they came to their senses and wanted to search for the spoils of war, they found that they didn't even get a single strand of hair from the corpses. On the other hand, the feudal lords were showing off to each other. One of them was holding 2 storage bracelets, and the other was holding 5 storage pouches, and they were winking at each other. Yunnan Tian was the one who reacted the fastest. This guy was the first to rush to the place where Yu Qianqiu killed the 15 people, and he took all the 15 storage bracelets for himself. He was holding a large pile of storage bracelets, and he couldn't stop laughing. He had completely lost the graceful and elegant temperament that he had always maintained. It's over so soon. Yu Qianqiu stopped in the air and was slightly stunned. To be honest, he hadn't fought to his heart's content for a long time. He thought that he could fight to his heart's content this time because there were many people, but who knew that it would be over so soon? Why couldn't he find an opponent with the absorbing star's great skill? Sigh. Yu Qianqiu looked into the distance speechlessly. He now thought that he had found a little bit of the lonely and invincible feeling of Bai Changchun. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.